It's an exciting day when the children of the church get particularly their first Bible, because it is an important step in the journey of faith. When I was in college, it was generally recognized that the Bible was a hard book, so some smart entrepreneur came out with what was called the book. Do you remember that? It took the Bible and it made it simple. My friends and I who were in college thought that was a good start, but it was still much too complex, so we wrote what was called the pamphlet. It had lots of pithy wisdom, like God is like Ed McMahon in The Tonight Show. You never see him, but you know he's there. That really has nothing to do with today's sermon, but seeing the kids with their Bibles always brings back good memories. In 1982, Carol Gilligan kind of upset the whole psychological establishment with a book of hers called In a Different Voice. Carol Gilligan was studying the impact of moral development and self-development, and she realized that all of the studies basically were focused on boys. Even the one study that had some girls, the woman who did it didn't do any critique, and she said, just because girls develop differently than boys doesn't mean it's less than. So for instance, there were studies when boys were together and they were playing sports, and if you've probably never seen this occur, but a disagreement arose about the rules, about following the rules, about how to follow the rules, and what to do with that. And what did the boys do? They fought about it, they argued about it, but what was important? Was it them? No, it was the game. It was the basketball game, it was the football game, it was the soccer game, it was the baseball game. The game was what was important, and they had to subsume themselves to the game. So they figured out whose rule was right, whose interpretation of the rules were right, and then whoever lost that, they didn't care. They just kept going because the game must go on. The girls, when they started having problems, what happened was the girls said, I like Susie, I like Mary, I'm not going to keep playing this stupid game if it means that I'm going to have a fight with my best friends. So they would discontinue the game. And all of the men, because men are correct, aren't we? All the women, you can throw things at me later. It was thought that, women just aren't competitive enough. They just lack that sense of killer instinct. The game must go on. Something is wrong with the girls. And Carol Gilligan said, time out. It's a different voice. Girls have a different voice. They have a different way of becoming who they are. Relationships matter. Relationships matter. And we shouldn't just sacrifice relationships for the sake of a stupid game. Unless you're a guy and the game is more important. But that was Carol Gilligan's instinct. James is an epistle in a different voice. James is a very fascinating epistle. This passage starts talking about wisdom. And when you think of wisdom, who comes to mind? Who was supposedly wise? Solomon, but think Chinese fortune cookie. Confucius was wise. Confucius was probably a horse's ass. I mean, if you read what Confucius wrote, that man was clearly uptight. He was wound just a little too tight, and I'm sure hanging with Confucius was a pain in the backside. James says, who is wise? Not the one who can spout fortune cookies. Not even Solomon, who could see through a situation and say, you got one woman thinks it's her child and another thinking it's her child. Let's split the baby down in half, knowing that the true mother's going to say, give it to the other woman. Because the true mother doesn't want anything, because she's a girl. Relationships are important. Women seem to think their children should live to reach adulthood. Fathers don't get this fundamentally, but women do. Solomon understood all of this. Solomon was wise. That's what we think of wisdom. Confucius, Solomon. James says, who's wise? The one who's gentle. the one who's wise, the one who's not envious or boastful or, quite frankly, a lousy person to be with. The wise person is the one that brings the kingdom of God. And that is always with gentleness and lovingness and kindness. James is an epistle in a different voice, like Carol Gilligan. And we're going to get to that in a minute. But I want to do it through a story by Lisa Bloom. If you like the story at the end of the sermon, let me tip you off. Don't tell me afterwards that you enjoyed hearing it during the sermon because it was in the preview. So say, oh, I enjoyed reading it in the preview, and then you could pretend you read the preview. So just a heads up. Lisa Bloom tells a story about a king who had a contest of who could do, with art contest, who could create the painting, the best painting of peace. And after all of the finalists, there were two. One was this still mountain lake. And it was just this still lake. And the other was this beautiful mountain pass, and there was this waterfall that went all the way down. I'm thinking like Hawaii, those waterfalls that come all the way down. And the king says, this one is the winner, not because of the waterfall. But if you look behind the waterfall, there's this little bush. And in the bush, there's a nest. And a mother bird is sitting on her eggs behind the waterfall. Peace is not something that happens when you're sitting on a mountain lake. You probably will find peace there, but how many of you live on a mountain lake devoid of wind? Any hands? Didn't think so. If the Buddha had to be sitting underneath a lotus tree to be enlightened, he wouldn't be the Buddha. Jeremiah says, beware of those who say peace, peace, where there is no peace. We live in a world right now where, quite frankly, I'm looking for peace anywhere I can find it. I literally will read a fortune cookie hoping for some foolish little piece of paper that says, look for peace. Maybe it'll be there. I don't feel all of this peace we're supposed to be having. And some of it is because we've got people who are acting with their male brains. I'm sorry. It's competition. The game must go on. The game is rigged against me. The game is rigged against you. All of this stuff, we're seeing it in the world today. And it's not leading us anywhere good. The king says the bird is sitting on the eggs behind this raging waterfall. And that takes peace and it takes discipline. If you have carried a baby to term for 9 months, it takes peace and it takes discipline. You have to give up just about everything enjoyable in your life to bring that baby to term. And it's a sacrifice. But what are those disciplines? And I really want to ask a very serious question. What are the eggs of possibility? What are the eggs of possibility in your life and in this church that we are willing to sit behind a waterfall until they hatch? We could say, well, they're probably not going to hatch. They're probably not going to hatch. It's COVID. We'll wait till next season. Is that being faithful? Is that what we're called to do? What are the eggs? And you know what? I have been so nice to you people. You don't believe it, but I have. And by that, I mean normally in a lot of my sermons, it is seriously audience participation time all the time. I have been so nice to you. So that ends today. What are some of the eggs of possibility we're sitting on? What do we hope for? Seriously, shout it out. There are no wrong answers. Hope. Health. Sanity. Oh my God. Am I hoping for sanity? I'll get back to that one. No more wars. What other eggs about? Wisdom. Unity. Confidence. See that one? You don't even need to ask for that. You sounded that loud. You got confidence, bro. You go. Justice. Cooperation. The ability to talk to each other. I'm not talking to you right now. There are things that we hold on to, and we dare speak them quietly, except for the confidence in the back. Well done. Was that John? Was that you, John? Was that Rick? Okay, I apologize. That sounded like something John would do. What are those things that we are willing to do? And the whole, the patience and forbearance and whatnot, there is a filling station at a Circle K at the bottom of Ortega Highway. My wife and I take the Ortega Highway. It's a beautiful highway to go to Temecula for some wine tasting. It is one of the things that we try to do occasionally for sanity. Drink some good wine. And it's cheap gas. But it's in a pretty lower economic area, shall we say. And there are two pumps, so there's 4 stations to get gas. And I pull up, and it's like, okay, I need gas. And there are 4 cars that are already there. 3 of them are not pumping gas because they're getting their groceries in the Circle K. So I wait behind the one where the person's pumping gas, and the person is in no hurry. And it has to go in and pay inside. I'm doing a slow burn. And then this finally leaves, and then the woman that's right in front of me, she pulls into the spot, and she sits there, and she pulls out her phone. And I'm watching her, it's like, what is she doing? And I'm waiting in line to pump my gas. Am I waiting patiently? No. Did I want to pull into that filling station? Mary said, oh, you should just go in there. And, intuition said, if there's not an open spot, don't pull in. And I listened to my wife, and I pulled in. And I'm going, why did I listen to my wife? And so after 3 minutes, I walk up, and I kind of knock on the window, and I said, are you planning on pumping fuel? She says, oh, yeah. Are you planning on doing that anytime soon? Oh, yeah. Rolls back up the window, gets back on her phone. At this point, it's like, this is a good argument for handgun control. Because I did not have the kind of impulse control at that point. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to leave. I'm going to give myself a timeout. I've had to do that a couple times in my life. I was a unit director. I had 200 kids under me and 16 counselors, and we were on a camping trip I was in charge of, and the kids were great, and the counselors were worthless. And they weren't doing anything they were supposed to do, and I had it, and I said, I'm giving myself a timeout. I'll be back in an hour. And they were like, ooh, we were in trouble. Because if BJ gave himself a timeout, we were in trouble. I mean, sometimes what you have to do is just leave. Sometimes if you're on that nest, you have to just get off the nest and fly away for a little bit. Get some food. Get your blood sugar back up. But don't do anything stupid. I mean, gentleness really precludes dumbness. This morning's scripture is about peace. It is about Jesus' peace that passes all understanding. I do not give as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not let them be afraid. This is not the world's peace. And I got to tell you, there are a lot of times in my life when I can marshal my resources and I can find that peace. And right now, not so much. And if I do not tap into the source of peace, which is higher up the food chain, I'm not finding it. If I'm not spending time in prayer, if I'm not just saying I'm in a situation where I realize I'm getting my anxiety is raising, and I just want to do a road rage because people are being idiots on the freeway, it's like, Lord, I need your help right now because I'm going to do something really dumb and something really unchristian. And as a pastor, you never know if a congregant is going to be watching. It is so not fair. You can get away with it and say, oh, Pastor, I had a bad day. But if I do it, it's like, Pastor, you know better. It's like, and I do know better. But that doesn't mean I want to do better. I do want to do better, but sometimes it's just like, I've just had it. I've had it in these days. In a different voice. Relationships matter. Gentleness matters. Sometimes you got to say, screw the game. We'll pick it up next week. Forget the rules. When I was thinking, I love kids. At camp, there was this kid, we were playing Capture the Flag, and he said, I wish there were no rules. And I said, why? He says, because then I could cheat. I said, now you understand that you can only cheat if there are rules, right? The idea of cheating means that there are rules that you're cheating on. He was like, what? It's like, no, if there were no rules, you couldn't cheat because there would be nothing to cheat on. Sometimes it's just the game, whatever the game is. And right now in our lives and in our world, people are playing a lot of games. And the games just need to stop. Because what unites us is so much more important. And it's so much deeper than what divides us. And what ultimately will see us through are the relationships that have been formed over trust and kindness and gentleness and not envy, not ambition. And envy is not good. Ambition is good, don't get me wrong. But not if it means you stick it to someone in a way that you shouldn't. This is a time, people. And I got to tell you, if you want to know what a minister needs, listen to what they preach on. Ministers preach on what we most need to learn, just so that you know. I'm giving away a trade secret. I shouldn't do it. I have to kill you before you leave, so sorry about that. But I got to tell you, I need this peace that passes all understanding. That comes from God. That only, in this moment particularly, only comes from an indwelling of God within us. That is the only place you're going to get it. You might get a respite on the golf course. You might get a respite when you're working with the Wednesday work group. Or we pig pile on Larry something awful. I mean, I do feel a little bad for Larry. And I mean, when I say a little, I mean a very, very little. But, you know, there is relief from those moments. They're pressure relief valves. But that's all done in love. Nobody teases in the Wednesday group unless they love you. But there's sometimes there is no pressure release in our life that's big enough for what we're going through right now. And that is where we need a different voice. It's where we need to turn to God. We need to drop into prayer. We need to say, not my will, but thy will be done. I can't do this alone. Lincoln said there were many times where he was driven to his knees because he had nowhere else to go. He had nowhere else to go. I got a good friend who, I get this stuff, and he says, well, you know, you get down, you know, you got to get down on your knees and you got to give it up. So next time I see him, he said, did you get down on your knees? Did you give it up? And I said, yep. He said, did you pick it back up when you got up? I said, yep. You know, I can lay it down, but I'm almost always going to pick it back up. That's what a man does, because the game must go on. No, that's what a fool does. And if you want to know what a fool is, I will lecture you and tell you exactly what I do, and you will then know. Give it up. Lay it down. Don't pick it back up. Be known by gentleness. Be known by love. Be known by caring. Be known by the kingdom that we build when we care for one another. And you have lifted up literally the eggs of possibility in this church and in your lives. Don't give up. Don't give up on those. They make all the difference in the world. Thank God for people like Carol Gilligan who show us that not always are men right. My wife will say that the old adage, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one to hear it, doesn't make a sound. The feminist version of that is if two men are arguing and there is no woman to hear them, are they both still wrong? Which she says, of course, and that too is a tautology. True under every circumstance. We need multiple voices. We need multiple ways of seeing reality. Treasure the eggs you have been given to care for. Sit on them well. Take a break. Give yourself a timeout when you need to. But this is a time when you know, as I do, that you can't do this by yourself. Let's turn to God now so that when we really need to later, it'll be easier. Because there are times when nothing else works. Nothing else works. Let's be that people. Amen.